Hello guys, and welcome back again, and this is part 2 of how to shaker style a door. And we're basically picking up from the last video where we didn't show you the entire completed door from start to finish, and in this video we've literally just started from scratch. We've picked up a door blank, we've shaken it for you, we've edged it, we've hinged it, trimmed it, sanded it, filled the holes with the wax, and lots of other little bits and pieces. So stay tuned, I hope you enjoy it, and enjoy. Right, firstly, let's go over the tools that you're going to need for the entire job. So to start with, you're going to need your door and your strips, and these particular strips we've cut at 70mm wide. We've got our rails and we've got our stiles, and behind it we've got our door. On this particular door I've just used a piece of 18mm. Other jobs we use 12mm, don't have any 12mm, so we need to use the 18. It's absolutely fine as long as you use the correct hinges. Some Blum hinges will be fine for doors up to 25mm thick. And the tools that we're going to be using are an iron, some 50mm edging. We're going for 50mm because we're adding 6mm to an 18mm door blank, giving us 24, which means our 22mm edging isn't big enough. And we're going to be using the 22mm for the 6mm strips. And we've got a selection of sandpapers. We've got P240, a piece of 600 there, which is optional, P100 and 100 on a block. We're going to be using the block for other purposes as well, to clean up our edging. We've got a scraper which we're going to be using for cleaning up the edging itself once it's glued on. And this burnisher here is used to give this scraper an edge to be able to trim your edging. If you don't want to go down that route, then you could just buy one of these Stanley trimmer blocks which you just squeeze over your work and it trims both sides at the same time. And then we've got a router or a mini trimmer. We're going for a Makita one here because it's just a nice solid workhorse. With that we're going to be using a micro round 1/4 inch cutter. These are brilliant for giving you that micro round that I always talk about. We've got PVA glue and we've got our pin gun, and this fires out up to 50mm pins or brads, but we're only going to be using 15mm brads for this particular job. And we're going to be using those pins and that gun with a compressor inside our workbench, and we've gone for a Stanley compressor and our hoses there. For drilling out the hinges, we've got 2 GTV hinges just because we've got them laying around. We use Blum as well, but it depends what the customer asks for and opts for. We've got some 20mm screws, some 420s. We've got this cup, and what we've done is we've taken out the top and we've put a little bit of masking tape on the other side, so when we drill our hinges we put this drill through the hole and it contains all the dust. And we've got a power drill as well, or a mains drill, and on that we've got a 35mm cutter, a hinge cutter. We've got our dust brush for dusting the work down before we start gluing. We've got an orbital sander, and on that orbital sander we're going to be using some hook and loop discs which are P240. Tape measure, masking tape for marking out the hinges at the back. That's optional. If you use a pencil you can rub out your lines instead. And we've got a combination square which is used for marking your hinge holes in your centres. And then we've got wax. On this particular wax it's sort of like a golden brown, and it comes in lots of different colours. On this particular one, because we're going oak, we're going for an oaky colour. And we've got one of my old tools which is a hacksaw blade wrapped around, and I put an edge on it to put that wax in the hole. And when you buy wax itself it comes with an applicator. We've got a mask for when we're sanding, and we've got 2 drills, one which is to put our screws in for our hinges, which has got a PZ2 bit on it, and then we've got this drill which is used for centering the holes when we drill them out for the hinges. Right, so what we've done is we've started with an 18mm door blank, and we're going to be using some 6mm oak veneer for the rails and the stiles. These long ones here are the stiles. They go all the way to the top of the door, from the top to the bottom, and the rails go in between the stiles, like so. When you're cutting your door, make sure that the grain goes upways, and we go with the grain and not sideways, because that is incorrect unless you're designing it that way. And when you're making sure which face that you're going for, just check both sides, look for the best grain. This one is a balancing grain, so it's not as nice, and I've gone for this particular grain. You can always look down on the boards as well, eye up to see where the bow is. If there is a bow in any sheet, if there is any slight bow, have that up, and that is my preference. And the door is 430 high, so that's what we've cut these strips to. And this door is 430 wide. We've taken off our style widths, which is 70mm, 140 in total, off of the door, giving us 290. So it is optional to edge these edges of the oak strips. In certain cases you don't necessarily need to. Again, it's preference, because the MDF colour is near enough exactly the same as the oak colour itself. So if you're doing the job for yourself or somebody that you've just made aware, it is possible not to edge them at all. For the sake of this video, I'm not going to edge them. I'm going to edge the edge of the door instead. So what we're going to go ahead and do now is trim corners of all the stiles and the rails so they're ready to glue on. And what I'm going to be using to trim all the stiles and the door at the end is my trusty Makita trimmer and router, whatever you want to call it. There'll be a link for that in the description. And we're going to be using a tiny little 1/4-inch cutter in it, and it's got a tiny little indent on the cutter just to give you that round. Everything that we've got to take an arris off a corner, we will use these cutters on the trimmer, and that's what we're going to do now. We're going to be trimming the long edges of the stiles, long edges of the rails, and the short edges of the rails. So now we're going to trim all our components. First of all, we're going to sand the actual edge itself with P100, then P240 on all those long edges by hand. Make sure you keep your block nice and square. If you need to put the piece in a vise, please do. Now we're going to sand all the rounds with our P240. Go with the grain on the shorter edges, don't go across because you might scratch the face. So, and then on the long ones you can go over this face and the actual corner itself, and take that sharp corner off here with a couple of swipes. On the stiles, you just need to go over this edge and the corner, no short edges, no choice. We'll be sanding the actual faces right at the end once the door's complete. So before we glue any of the stiles or the rails on, we just need to dust the door down. Just a little broom or a dusting brush. We'll do the same for all the strips. So the next thing you want to do is glue up all your stiles and rails. Use a good quality PVA. If you're new to this, just glue and pin one at a time, but I'm going to be gluing all four because I can pin them down within 5 minutes of gluing them. So now I've flipped over the stiles and the rails to the other side. I'm just going to glue them with a good quality PVA. Go around the perimeter, around 6mm within the perimeter of each component, then fill in each space. So now I've glued all the pieces, I'm just going to move them all away, barring one stile. Use my finger and a thumb as a guide, give a little wobble, make sure it doesn't go past onto the face, otherwise the glue will stop the oil from penetrating, or the lacquer. Get my pin gun, 15mm pins, make sure it's not going to move. One pin in the side here, make sure you wear your goggles. One on that end, one in the centre. Just make sure that's nice and flush on that edge. So now we've got the first one pinned, let's go for a rail. So this one's going to butt up against this stile and it's going to be at the bottom of the door. So let's get that in nice and carefully. Use your thumbs as a guide at the bottom of the door. Give it a little wobble, squidge that glue in. Don't get any on the face again because the oil again won't penetrate. Get that shoulder nice. This one only needs 2 pins. So now you can flip your door around if it's small enough. Again, get your other rail. Make sure you have your sanded edge and your trimmed edge up. Use your finger as a guide and your thumbs. If you do feel like you need another one here, if you feel like it's lifting or there's a little gap, make sure you put another pin in. These are nice and flat, they don't need it. All I need to do is get my last stile, go nice and gently up against the rails. Make sure it's flush again, flush here. It should be flush if you've got your rails right. Again, go. One in the centre. There we go. So we're up to the point where we've shaken the door, and because we decided not to edge these strips on this particular door, can you see they just blend in lovely? You don't even know that they've not been edged. All we need to do is edge around the edges of the doors here. So they're all put on now, so that's the shakering finished, and all we need to do is edge the actual door itself, go around with some iron-on edging. So if we get that into the vise. Okay, so now to edge the actual door itself, and on this particular video I'm only going to be edging one edge, not all of them, but it's the same process on every single edge. And on this door, because it's 25mm thick, this door we're going to be using a 50mm iron-on edging, and it's pre-glued on the back, and it comes in a roll like this, maybe 100 meters. You do get 22mm version as well, which you can use for the 6mm or 18mm doors in total. Like I said, this one is 24 in total, so we need to go for the slightly fatter version. So what we need to do is just cut all our strips. On this particular door I'm only doing one, so I've cut one about 1.5 inches, something like that, longer than the actual door itself. And before I even start gluing this on, I need to just make sure that this surface is sound, and I'm happy that the iron-on edging is going to sit on that nicely. So I've got my block, I've got P100 on it. I'm just going to give it a few swipes. Stand on the edge of the door and just use your fingers as guides, keep it nice and square, push your thumbs down. There we go. That is all you really need to do, just make sure it's nice and flat. If there's any little marks on it that are going to get covered, you don't really need to worry about those. Give a little dust. Okay, so the next thing is to do is get an iron-on edging. Place that on, leave about 3 or 4mm overhang on the front, there you go, and get your iron, which has been on for about 4 or 5 minutes, nice and hot, and just go backwards and forwards. Some people use brown paper to protect the edging or other protective papers, but I've been just using an iron for years, and I've found that it's not burnt. As long as you keep moving it side to side and not keep on it for too long, you know that glue is melting when it's hot to touch. And just before you leave that, get your block again with a sandpaper and flatten it down. So you're basically sanding up that edging and you're flattening it down and getting the glue compressed at the same time. Give it a slight tilt if you like to push down on the corner. Again, turn it slightly that way, push down on that corner. And you can do the same at the end, just push slightly down on the back edge and the front edge. And before we start trimming, we need to let that cool down. Okay, so now it's nice and cool. All we need to do is get our block, take the sanding paper off, and just give it a little tilt. A couple of times, there we go, we've put a nice line on it. Put your block back on and lift it up. There we go. And don't worry about that bit yet. And the same here. Put your block back on right on the crease. Lift it up and down. There we go. What we need to do then is just trim this front edge and this back edge off. And for that job, you've got two options. You can go for a scraper, and it's just a flat bit of metal, and you put a burr on it, and you put a burr on it using a burnisher, which is a hard metal bar, and you rub it down just to give you that sharp edge, and that edge is what cuts it. Or if you want something a little bit easier, you can go for one of these Stanley trimmers. So that just sits on top and runs all the way through. So on this version, we're just going to be showing you the scraper version, and what I like to do is start with my scraper on the edge, nice and flat with one finger, and start chopping down. There we go, now we've got it started. Just like a pair of scissors. It stays nice and flat to the surface. Just make sure your scraper is nice and sharp using your burnisher. Once you've done that, you can give it a little scrape. We're going to do the same for the back edge. Get it started and then just chop down like a pair of scissors. There we go. So now it's actually the same width as the door. Run over it a few times and give it a little scrape. we go. Okay, so now we've got the door to the point where we've shaken it all up and we've got all the edging on. We've got a few bits left to do. We need to fill the holes with the wax, we need to hinge at the back, and we need to take all the sharp arises off with the trimmer. And then once we've done that, we need to sand it. Let's flip the door over and start hinging. So let's just say this edged part of the door is the part that we need to hinge. The rule of thumb for me is come down 100mm and up 100mm on a tiny door like this. And my rule of thumb as well is come across 23mm to the start of the hole and 23mm. So you've got 100, 23, that will give you a crosshair, and that is the center of your 35mm hole. Okay, for the sake of the video, I've put a bit of masking tape on there just so I don't put pencil marks on the actual door itself. And I've come up 100, up 100, inside 23, inside 23, and that is the center of my hinge or my cutter. So what I'm going to do on that center point, I'm going to get my bradawl, which is a sharp point, and I'm going to just find that point, that crosshair, give it a little wobble. Same on the other one, make sure you get that nice and center. I need to get my mains powered drill and drill that out. Right, so I've got my power drill ready with a 35mm hinge cutter in it. Find the center, so the tip of your drill bit will go directly onto that hole that you made with the bradawl. Keep it nice and parallel, upright, not sideways. Make sure it's nice and level. And what you want to do is just drill it down until the top part of the hinge is just a mil or so below the surface. So that's what it should look like. We're going to do that for the other one too. And this is what it should look like with both holes done. And now. So I'm going to need 2 hinges. In this instance, we've got 2 GTV holes done, full overlay hinges. I'm going to use a little gadget, which is a drill bit with a collar on it. So when you push the collar down, that's it, the drill bit comes out. And that will ride on the inside of this hole, giving you a center hole every time, and a straight edge and a combi drill. So let's put that in. Put your 2 hinges in, straight edge up against your hinges, push your hinges down, make sure they're nice and square and not wobbling around, make sure they're pushed down nice and solid. Hold your straight edge in place, get your drill, make sure your collar is riding up against the hole itself, push down. Hinge moves a little bit, just push that down again. So now that we've hinged the door and we've pre-drilled the holes, the hinges are now complete. We need to go around the actual door itself and trim all the sharp arises off, both faces, back face and front face. Now the trimming has been done, let's go ahead and fill these brad holes with some wax. We've got lots of different colours of wax, but let's go for this one, which is more tan colour. And what we're going to use is an applicator, one of these two. Made this one myself with an old hacksaw blade, wrap it with a bit of masking tape, and this one came with the actual waxes itself. So let's use this one here, let's dig it into the wax, take a little bit out, very small amount, put it on the hole. Just give it a little squash down, give it a little wobble as you squash it down. Careful not to scratch the work itself. And again, grab a little bit, not much. Push down, give it a little wobble, and pull back your spreader as you're pushing it in. So just make sure you fill the holes exactly the same way for every single hole. And to clean up the face before you sand it, I would just say get your scraper and give it a couple of swipe backs. And what this does is just takes it off from the surface and just cleans it up nicely before you start using your sandpaper, because this will just clog up otherwise. And clean them up as best as you can. And you can either sand up the door by hand, or you can go over the orbital once you finish. We're going to be sanding the door up with an orbital sander, so we're not just going to use sandpaper. Okay, so now we've got our orbital sander ready. We've got P240 on it and we've got our dust bag on it. You can attach it to a hoover, which I would usually do, but for the sake of the video, just using a dust bag. Put it on high speed. We're going to go over the inside of this panel, up and down, up and down, up and down, around the front face on the shaker borders itself, flip the door over and do the back face. So let's go. Okay, so now we've sanded up all the faces, inside the panel, on the border of the panel, at the back. We need to go around all the edging that we applied at the beginning and all the micro rounds that we put on, all the arises. So literally just get yourself a piece, fold it in three, and just give it a light rub. And a couple of swipes, taking those sharp corners off the tips. And also just go within this space, going with the grain because our orbital sander is curved. We just need to get those corners in as well. Because we did all these arises at the start of the job, we don't need to touch any of these are already finished. And there we go, job done. Ready for oiling. And I'm not showing you oiling on this particular job because that is a video coming in 2 weeks' time, straight after this one. There we go, hinges already done, shakering finished. Apart from a few holes which I've missed out. So now the sun's come out and it's daytime, you can actually see those stile and rail edges. What I was talking about, you don't necessarily have to edge them if you don't want to. They blend in absolutely perfectly with the oak. And I'm really happy with these. And they're really nice, and here's the edge as well. Alright guys, so I hope you enjoyed that video, and this one especially was for Jennifer Childs, who asked us the question to continue part 2 of the last video. So we have, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Well, I hope all of you have enjoyed it. If you have, please feel to like and subscribe and click the notification bell so you get your updates when the next video is coming out. Any questions, just fire them in the comments bar. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Press the notification bell and we'll see you in the next one. Ciao for now.